The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When the days for Jesus to be taken up were fulfilled, he resolutely determined to journey to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him. On the way, they entered a Samaritan village to prepare for his reception there, but they would not welcome him, because the destination of his journey was Jerusalem. When the disciples James and John saw this, they asked, "Lord, you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" Jesus turned and rebuked them, and they journeyed to another village. The Gospel of the Lord. Through this gospel passage, we get a chance to witness what must have been an emotional moment for the Lord. Right here in the chapter 9 of Luke's gospel, the first sentence reveals it. When the days for Jesus to be taken up were fulfilled, he resolutely determined to journey to Jerusalem. So before this, Jesus is going around the towns and visiting, preaching, teaching, healing. But it's at this moment he makes the choice. I'm going to Jerusalem. And that means the beginning of the journey to the cross. Can you imagine making a decision like that? Now, as he goes along, the first thing that happens is he's unwelcomed in the Samaritan town. It's the beginning of what's going to happen. As he goes towards Jerusalem, is rejected to the point of being arrested. And what we see revealed here is the way he's going to respond. He's not going to respond in kind. James and John want the fires of heaven to come down on these people. Jesus rebukes them. Remember what he said before? If someone doesn't welcome you, shake the dust from your feet and keep going. That's going to be his response. So I was thinking of a moment like this today. I don't know if all of you know the name Stan Rother. He's a priest from Oklahoma. And he had a hard time in the seminary with Latin. In fact, they told him, maybe you should be called to a different life. Maybe God's calling you to do something else. And then somebody else talked to him, and he talked to the archbishop, and they said, I got another seminary in mind. And he finally went to Mount St. Mary's in Maryland. He was able to get through his studies, became a priest, served a little bit in his home archdiocese in Oklahoma, and then he heard about being a missionary, going out as part of the diocesan mission to Guatemala. So he went. And he grew up on a farm, so he knew farming. And it was very easy for him to work with the people, which really edified them. Here he was as a priest, working on the tractor with them out in the fields. He really was a priest for the people. You know, when Pope Francis says he wants the priest to have the smell of the sheep, this was definitely Father Stan Rother. Well, then the Civil War broke out in Guatemala. Really, Father Rother was just preaching the gospel. He was just caring for the poor, preaching the gospel, preaching nonviolence, and he became one of the enemies among the factions in the Civil War. And then finally his name came on a list. They heard about him on the death list. People were urging him, you gotta go home. You gotta get out of here now. They're gonna kill you. He didn't want to go. He said the shepherd doesn't flee from his sheep. They kept after him. So then they said, well, maybe you can go home for a while, just until this calms down. So he went home. This is the point where I think it's parallel with Jesus. He's sitting at home, his family's farm, and his sister said he used to sit there and look out the window and they'd look out the window for long times. What he was thinking about were his people and his responsibility to continue to be their shepherd. I met the Archbishop who told us about how he came to the seminary, because this Archbishop at that time was rector of the seminary, and he wanted to go on retreat. So he went on some days of retreat, and during that retreat he told the Archbishop, I know if I go back, they're going to kill me. But I have to go. It's the same moment that Jesus is experiencing in the gospel here. He's made the decision, I'm going to Calvary. Father Stan Rother made a similar decision. And sure enough, when he went back, I don't remember how long it was after he got back, 2 men broke in the rectory and they shot him. He's now beatified. He's the first U.S.-born martyr in our country. And the people asked if they could have part of his remains. So the body is buried in Oklahoma with his family and his home diocese. But the people of Guatemala said, can we have his heart? And the church agreed. And his heart is buried under the altar at his church in Guatemala. So as we reflect on the day, as we reflect on this gospel, let us allow it to sink in even more in our hearts how much the Lord loves us. He had to make this choice, knowing what was ahead. Is there a greater love?